What if I told you that everything you've been taught about happiness is a lie? What if the secret to a fulfilled life isn't about thinking positive thoughts or manifesting your dreams, but about something so counterintuitive, so brutally honest, that most people can't handle it? I am about to share 7 psychological truths from Mark Manson's controversial bestseller that will shatter everything you think you know about success, happiness, and what it means to live a meaningful life. But I warn you, once you hear truth number 4, you can never unsee how broken our society really is. Welcome back to The Summary Self, where we dive deep into the books that don't just inform you, they transform you. I'm your host, and today we're exploring a book that dares to ask the question nobody wants to answer. What if caring less is actually the key to caring more? Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F to K is not your typical self-help book. It won't tell you to smile more or think happy thoughts. Instead, it's going to challenge every assumption you have about what makes life worth living. Over the next 20 minutes, I'll take you through 7 life-changing principles that have helped millions of people break free from the prison of other people's expectations. And here's my promise. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the happiest people you know aren't the ones trying to be happy. They're the ones who've mastered the art of strategic indifference. But first, let me paint you a picture. Lesson 1. The feedback loop from hell. Picture this. It's 3 a.m. You're lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, your mind racing. You're anxious about tomorrow's presentation. But then, something worse happens. You start feeling anxious about being anxious. Why can't I just relax, you think? Everyone else seems to have it together. What's wrong with me? And now you're not just anxious about the presentation. You're ashamed of your anxiety, frustrated with your inability to just be positive, and spiraling deeper into what Mark Manson calls the feedback loop from hell. Here's what's happening in your brain. Every time you judge yourself for having a negative emotion, you create a secondary emotion. You're not just sad, you're sad about being sad. You're not just angry. You're angry about being angry. Let me share a story that will make this crystal clear. Sarah, a 28-year-old marketing executive, came home from work feeling defeated. Her boss had criticized her campaign in front of the entire team. She felt embarrassed, hurt, angry. But instead of just feeling those emotions, Sarah's inner voice kicked in. You're being too sensitive. Successful people don't get upset by criticism. You should be grateful for feedback. Stop being so weak. Now, Sarah wasn't just dealing with workplace criticism. She was at war with herself. Here's the psychological trap. Our culture has taught us that negative emotions are somehow wrong. We've been conditioned to believe that happy, successful people don't feel doubt, fear, or sadness. But neuroscience reveals something shocking. The people who try hardest to be happy are often the most miserable. Dr. Iris Mouse at UC Berkeley discovered that the more pressure people put on themselves to feel good, the more likely they are to experience depression and anxiety. Mark Manson realized something revolutionary. What if the goal isn't to eliminate negative emotions, but to stop fighting them? The Buddhist concept of suffering teaches us that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Pain is what happens to you. Suffering is your resistance to that pain. When Sarah finally stopped judging herself for feeling hurt by criticism, something magical happened. The hurt was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She could feel it, acknowledge it, and then let it pass. But here's where it gets really interesting. If trying to feel good all the time is the trap, then what should we actually focus our energy on? The answer lies in a question most people are too afraid to ask themselves, and it completely changes everything. About Lesson 2, choosing your struggles. We've been asking the wrong question our entire lives. Society tells us to ask, what do you want? What are your dreams? What would make you happy? But Mark Manson discovered that everyone wants the same things: success, love, happiness, freedom, respect. The real question, the one that separates those who achieve their dreams from those who just dream, is this: what pain are you willing to endure? Let me tell you about two musicians I know. Both dreamed of rock stardom. Story 1. Marcus practiced guitar for hours every day. His fingers bled. He played in dingy clubs for crowds of 3 people. He slept in his car between gigs. He was rejected by record labels 47 times. But here's the thing. Marcus loved the struggle. The late-night practices felt like meditation. The small crowds were his laboratory. Each rejection was just data. Story 2. Tyler also wanted to be a rock star. He bought expensive equipment, talked about his music constantly, even got a tattoo of a guitar on his arm. But when it came time to practice scales for hours, Tyler got bored. When small venues offered him gigs, he said they weren't worth his time. When people gave him feedback, he got defensive. Tyler wanted the result. Marcus chose the process. Psychological insight. Here's what neuroscience tells us. Our brains are prediction machines. They're constantly asking what comes next. And when we choose our struggles, we're essentially programming our prediction engine for long-term satisfaction. Research by Dr. Angela Duckworth on grit reveals that people who achieve extraordinary things don't just have talent. They have a specific relationship with difficulty. They've learned to find meaning in the struggle itself. Personal connection moment. Think about your own life right now. What problems do you complain about the most? Your job is stressful? Your relationships are complicated? You don't have enough money? Now flip the question. What if those weren't problems to be solved, but challenges to be chosen? The person who chooses the struggle of building a business loves solving problems more than they hate uncertainty. The person who chooses the struggle of deep relationships loves growth more than they fear conflict. The person who chooses the struggle of fitness loves feeling strong more than they hate sweating. But here's where most people get stuck. They want to choose their struggles, but they're trapped in a victim mindset. They're waiting for someone else to take responsibility for their lives. And that brings us to perhaps the most liberating and terrifying truth in the entire book. Lesson 3, responsibility versus fault. Let me tell you about Jessica, a 32-year-old teacher whose life changed in a single moment of clarity. Jessica grew up with an alcoholic father. Her childhood was chaos, broken promises, screaming matches, financial instability. By any measure, Jessica was dealt a terrible hand. At 32, Jessica was still angry, still blaming her father for her trust issues, her fear of commitment, her struggles with money. Then she read something that stopped her cold. You are not responsible for everything that happens to you, but you are responsible for how you respond to everything that happens to you. This is Mark Manson's most controversial idea, and it's the one that changes everything. Here's the distinction that most people miss. Fault. Who caused the problem? Responsibility. Who has the power to change it? Jessica didn't cause her traumatic childhood. That wasn't her fault. But at 32, Jessica was the only person who could decide what her childhood trauma meant for her future. That was her responsibility. Deeper psychological insight. Dr. Martin Seligman's research on learned helplessness shows us something profound. When people believe they have no control over their circumstances, they stop trying to improve them. But the opposite is also true. When people realize they have control over their responses, even to unfair situations, they become unstoppable. Real-world example. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor, wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." Frankl wasn't responsible for being sent to a concentration camp, but he was responsible for choosing how to respond to that unthinkable situation. Modern application. Your boss is a micromanager, not your fault. How you handle it. Your responsibility. Your ex cheated on you? Not your fault. How you heal and move forward. Your responsibility. You were born into poverty? Not your fault. What you do with your circumstances. Your responsibility. The liberation moment. Here's what Jessica discovered. The moment she stopped waiting for her father to apologize, to change, to make things right, she became free. She wasn't a victim of her past anymore. She was the author of her future. But Jessica had to face another uncomfortable truth. Taking full responsibility means giving up one of our most cherished illusions. The illusion that we are always right. And this next lesson, it's going to shake you to your core. Because it reveals how our desperate need to be certain is actually keeping us trapped in ignorance. Lesson 4. The certainty trap. I'm about to share with you the most dangerous addiction in modern society. It's not drugs. It's not alcohol. It's not even social media. It's certainty. Think about the last argument you had on social media. Did you go into it thinking, maybe I'm wrong? Or did you go in ready to prove your point? Think about your political beliefs, your religious views, your opinions about success, relationships, parenting. How often do you genuinely consider that you might be completely wrong? The psychological reveal. Mark Manson argues that our need to be right is literally making us stupid, and science backs this up. The Dunning-Kruger effect shows us that the less we actually know about a topic, the more confident we feel about our knowledge. Story example. Meet David, a successful entrepreneur who built $1 million company in his 20s. David was certain he understood business, leadership, and success. Then his company failed, spectacularly. For months, David blamed external factors, the economy, his employees, his competitors, bad luck. But eventually, David had to face a terrifying possibility. Maybe everything he thought he knew about business was wrong. The transformation. That moment of uncertainty changed David's life. Instead of doubling down on his old strategies, he became curious. He studied his failures. He asked questions instead of giving answers. He hired mentors instead of trying to figure everything out himself. His next company, it made $10 million. The broader implications. Here's what neuroscience tells us. When we're certain, our brains stop learning. Certainty triggers the brain's confirmation bias. We only see evidence that supports what we already believe. But uncertainty activates our learning centers. It makes us curious, humble, growth-oriented. Look around you. Our entire culture is built on false certainty. Politicians who admit they don't know something are seen as weak. Experts who change their minds are labeled as flip-floppers. People who ask questions instead of giving answers are seen as indecisive. But the wisest people in history, Socrates, Einstein, Darwin, all shared one quality: intellectual humility. So here's my challenge for you. What is one belief you hold with absolute certainty? About relationships, about money, about success, about life. What if you're wrong? What if questioning that belief could open up possibilities you've never even considered? But even if you embrace uncertainty, there's still one thing our culture has taught us to fear above all else. And Mark Manson says this fear is keeping us from everything we truly want. Lesson 5. Failure as your friend. Let me tell you about the worst student in art class. His name was Chuck Jones, and his professor had some harsh words for him. Chuck, you've drawn thousands of drawings and they're all terrible. But you've gotten 100 terrible drawings out of your system. Keep going. Chuck took that advice to heart. He kept drawing terrible drawings, hundreds more, thousands more. Eventually, Chuck Jones became one of the most celebrated animators in history. He created Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, and Porky Pig. Here's what Chuck understood that most people don't. Failure isn't the opposite of success. Failure is success. Every terrible drawing wasn't a mistake. It was data. It was progress. It was the price of admission to mastery. Psychological insight. Mark Manson reveals something that goes against everything we've been taught. The people who succeed the most are the people who fail the most, not because they're unlucky, but because they're willing to try more things, take more risks, and learn from more mistakes. Scientific backing. Dr. Carol Dweck's research on growth mindset shows that people who view failure as learning opportunities literally grow more neural connections in their brains. Meanwhile, people who avoid failure to protect their ego stay stuck at the same level forever. Modern example. James Dyson created 5,126 failed prototypes before inventing the revolutionary vacuum cleaner that made him billions. When asked about those failures, Dyson said, "I didn't fail 5,126 times. I learned 5,126 ways not to make a vacuum cleaner." The deeper truth. Here's what most people don't understand about failure. It's not about the external outcome, it's about who you become in the process. Every failure builds resilience. Every mistake builds wisdom. Every setback builds character. The person who's failed 100 times and gotten back up is infinitely stronger than the person who's never tried anything difficult. Personal application. What have you been avoiding because you might fail? Starting that business? Having that difficult conversation? Learning that new skill? Taking that risk? Your avoidance of failure isn't protecting you, it's imprisoning you. But here's the thing about taking risks and facing failures. You can't do everything. You can't say yes to every opportunity. And that brings us to one of the most powerful skills you will ever develop, a skill that most people are terrified to use. Lesson 6, the superpower of no. Warren Buffett was once asked about the secret to his success. His answer was shocking. The difference between successful people and really successful people is that really successful people say no to almost everything. The paradox. We live in a culture that worships options. More choices, more opportunities, more experiences. But Mark Manson reveals a counterintuitive truth. True freedom isn't having unlimited options. True freedom is the ability to eliminate options. Story example. Meet Sarah, a talented photographer who said yes to everything. Wedding photography, corporate headshots, family portraits, product photography, event photography. Sarah was busy. Sarah was making money. But Sarah was miserable. She had no time for her passion projects. Her quality was suffering because she was spread too thin. She felt like she was drowning in other people's priorities. Then Sarah learned the power of strategic no. She decided to specialize only in wedding photography. She said no to 80% of the work that came her way. What happened? Her income doubled, her stress halved, her passion returned. The psychology. Here's what psychologists have discovered. Every yes you give to something you don't truly want is a no to something you do want. When you say yes to that party you don't want to attend, you're saying no to the evening of reading you've been craving. When you say yes to that project that doesn't align with your goals, you're saying no to the opportunity that could change your life. The relationship dimension. This applies especially to relationships. People pleasers think they're being kind by saying yes to everything, but they're actually being dishonest. They're saying yes with their mouth, while saying no with their energy, their enthusiasm, their authentic self. The business application. Steve Jobs was famous for saying no. When he returned to Apple, he canceled 70% of their products to focus on just a few revolutionary items. That focus created the iPhone, the iPad, and made Apple the most valuable company in the world. The deeper principle. Every no is actually a yes to something more important. No to the networking event you dread. Yes to quality time with your family. No to the business opportunity that doesn't excite you. Yes to the one that does. No to the relationship that drains you. Yes to the one that energizes you. The challenge. What do you need to say no to in your life right now? What commitments are you keeping out of guilt rather than genuine desire? What opportunities are you pursuing because you think you should, not because you want to? But even if you master all these principles, even if you stop giving a fuck about the wrong things, choose your struggles, take responsibility, embrace uncertainty, learn from failure, and say no strategically, there's still one final truth that puts everything into perspective, and it's the most important lesson of all. Lesson 7. Death, the ultimate. In the final pages of his book, Mark Manson forces us to confront the one truth we spend our entire lives avoiding. We are all going to die, not someday, not eventually, not in some distant future, sooner than you think, sooner than you're comfortable considering. The story. Manson tells the story of a man named Ernest Becker, who won a Pulitzer Prize for his book, The Denial of Death. Becker argued that all human civilization is essentially an elaborate system designed to help us avoid thinking about our mortality. We build monuments, create legacies, pursue fame, accumulate wealth, all in a desperate attempt to achieve a kind of symbolic immortality. The psychological insight. But here's the paradox. The more we deny death, the less we truly live. When we pretend we have unlimited time, we waste the time we have. When we act like we'll live forever, we postpone the things that matter most. The transformation story. Let me tell you about Maria, a 45-year-old lawyer who lived for her career. 60-hour weeks, constant stress, success by every external measure. Then Maria's doctor said 3 words that changed everything. You have cancer. Suddenly, all the things she thought mattered, the promotion, the bigger office, the impressive title, seemed trivial. The things she'd been postponing, travel with her husband, calls with old friends, quiet mornings reading books, became urgent priorities. Maria survived. But more importantly, she learned to live. The philosophical truth. The Stoic philosophers had a practice called memento mori, remember death. Not to be morbid, but to be grateful. Not to be depressed, but to be present. When you truly accept that your time is limited, everything changes. You stop caring about impressing people you don't even like. You stop pursuing goals that don't align with your values. You stop giving your precious energy to things that don't truly matter. The final insight. Mark Manson's ultimate message isn't, don't give a fuck about anything. It's be extremely selective about what you give a fuck about. Because in the end, we're all just here for a brief moment, a cosmic blink of an eye. The question isn't whether you'll face problems, pain, and difficulty. You will. The question is, will you choose problems worth having? Will you choose pain worth enduring? Will you choose a life worth living? The call to action. Right now, as you're listening to this, your life is happening. Not tomorrow, not next week, right now. What are you giving your precious fucks to? What are you choosing to care about? Are those choices creating the life you actually want to live? Or are you trapped in caring about what other people think you should care about? If you've made it this far, you're not just someone looking for easy answers. You're someone ready to do the hard work of living authentically. Mark Manson's 7 principles aren't just ideas, they're invitations. Invitations to stop living other people's lives and start living your own. To stop caring about the wrong things and start caring deeply about the right things. Here's what I want you to do right now. Think of one thing you've been giving too many fucks about. One worry, one fear, one source of stress that isn't actually serving you. And let it go. Not forever, just for today. Then think of one thing you haven't been giving enough fucks about. One relationship, one goal, one value that deserves more of your energy, and give it your attention, your care, your fucks. If this video helped you see your life differently, smash that like button. It tells YouTube to share this message with others who need it. Subscribe to The Summary Self for more life-changing book insights delivered with the depth they deserve. And in the comments, share this. What's one thing you're going to stop giving a fuck about? And what's one thing you're going to start caring more about? I read every comment, and your insights often inspire future videos. Remember, you have a finite number of fucks to give. Spend them wisely. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep choosing what matters. This is the Summary Self, and I'll see you in the next deep dive.